front door open during the service? I've forgotten how to do that. Will you do that? Are we missing Aaron? Is Aaron?
No, Aaron's not well. He's not well. He's not coming in.
Oh,
It's a bit of a
shame.
Just to note, we are online now.
Right. Yeah.
Come into this house to share the warmth of fellowship, the light of inner divinity and outer searching. Come into this house of stories, prayers, and silence. Come into the house to know yourself, your fellows, and the divine. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday service. I'm grateful for your presence here, those who've come into town today, and for those listening online. And I'm grateful for your journeys that have brought you here, the reasons both long-term as well as the immediate reasons of today. And I hope that whatever it is that you have come into this space yearning to find or to seek, be it a space for tears and sadness, to share the pain of your lives, or the joy and celebration, to share in laughter with other people, or if you've come hoping to share a few words of wisdom, I hope they might be found, as well as a chance to just rest with the divine and with our community. There are so many reasons to come together today, and we need not be exclusive in our community for such reasons. So we begin our service as we do every week with the lighting of our chalice, and today we have a few words from the Reverend David Johnson. We meet on holy ground, for that place is holy where we meet each other, where lives touch, where love moves, where hope stirs. How strong is our need for one another, our silent beckoning to our neighbors, our invitations to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcome into our own. We kindle our chalice, a bowl of light reflecting that eternal light which is always around and before us. And so with our chalice lit, our service begins. And we begin by moving, I often think of this intro, as I've said, as sort of concentric circles. We begin with a very universal call to worship, and then we pay recognition to our Unitarian tradition with the lighting of our chalice. We turn now to something within our community, the recitation of our covenant, which was developed a few years ago by this congregation. So please do recite it along with me. For those of you who are here presently, please do it. For those listening online, if you want to belt it out, if you're in a place where you can do so, then that is all right. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant. Amen. And moving, therefore, into our final circle of sort of personal connection, we have a time of prayer with these words of Eternal Spirit, whom we call God, you are our life. You are the best and the most beautiful in us and beyond us. Your spirit is in animals, birds, plants, and in people whom we do not know, of whom seem very different from us. All of us share the gift of life. Help us to remember that life is good. Help us to know that we don't stop loving people or other living things when they are no longer near us. Love lasts always. May we look for ways to love one another and to love all living things. Amen. And so we turn to our first hymn, Stopford Augustus Brooks, So Simple is the Human Heart.
From the
Thank you. We now have a couple readings and a few words of my own, beginning with Art and Fear by David Bayles and Ted Orland. This was a book that was a number of years ago, led by the Reverend Mark Bellatini. And it's one that I keep returning to sort of in my life as someone who is involved in sort of creative pursuits and who's, I suppose, present at that creative level of my mind. So this is from the second chapter, which is entitled Art and Fear. Those who would make art might well begin by reflecting on the fate of those who preceded them. Most who began quit. It's a genuine tragedy. Worse yet, it's an unnecessary tragedy. After all, artists who continue and artists who quit share an immense field of common emotional ground. Viewed from the outside, in fact, they're indistinguishable. We're all subject to a familiar and universal progression of human troubles we routinely survive, but which are, oddly enough, routinely fatal to the art-making process. To survive as an artist requires confronting troubles. Basically, those who continue to make art continue, or more precisely, have learned how to not quit. But curiously, while artists always have a myriad of reasons to quit, they consistently wait for a handful of specific moments to quit. Artists quit when they convince themselves that their next effort is already doomed to fail. And artists quit when they lose the destination for their work, for the place their work belongs. Virtually all artists encounter such moments. Fear that your next work will fail is a recurring and generally healthy part of the art-making cycle. It happens all the time. You focus on some new idea in your work. You try it out, you run with it for a while, reach a point of diminishing returns, and eventually decide it's not worth pursuing further. Writers even have a phrase for it. The pen has run dry. All media have their equivalents. In the normal artistic cycle, this just tells you that you've come full circle, back to that point where you need to begin cultivating the next new idea. But in artistic death, it marks the last thing that happens. You play out an idea, it stops working, you put the brush down, and 30 years later you confide to someone over coffee that, well, yes, you had wanted to paint when you were much younger. Quitting is fundamentally different from stopping. The latter happens all the time. Quitting happens once. Quitting means not starting again. And art is all about starting again. From Art and Fear by David Bayles and Ted Orland. And we turn then to a poem, again, one that I return to sort of time and again, by Christine Evans, called Meeting the Boat. Saturdays, we sit outside the boathouse to wave goodbye and watch the next lot land. Some arrival well wrapped in the bubble of expectations we might see punctured by a sharpening edge of sense, if they stay long enough. Rucksacked, festooned with lenses, the bird-watchers are triggered to observe specific features of a habitat where humans only incidentally intrude. While for the women, clammy, overeager hands and blood-drained faces coming on retreat that to themselves they call a pilgrimage, the island, all of us are in soft focus. Families returning spring ashore with cries like raiders, pick a plastic float or to throw stones. Claude tells the lobsterman what bait to use. Most new ones step ashore subdued with egos well restrained, on leash, until they have their island image steady and their landscape shrunk to context. The dinghy ferries the beach without their wives or suitcases. Ankle deep, they stand bemused or bray for contact. Infants clutch and whine. Now the voyage of discovery, or just getting here, turns into a performance or a ritual no one told them to expect. They lurch and blunder over thwarts, or scramble weak-slimed rocks towards the patch of sand, the cliff, the row of waiting faces. In turn, each has to improvise a way to make a meeting with our mustered forces. Then we will form a chain to land the luggage. Meeting the Boat by Christine Evans. My first year at music college was quite difficult. I had not anticipated the psychological toll being around so many talented individuals would be. I had, of course, attended weekend workshops and summer programs and various events that ensured I was always learning and hopefully aware of how I could improve. But suddenly, being surrounded by these bright young things 24/7 seeded a flower of self-doubt. Hearing them practice in the day and hold lengthy, erudite conversations at night acted as a fertilizer, stimulating which even today requires frequent pruning. So it was with luck that in my first year we performed Kabalevsky's Overture to Kolos Bronion. I had played the music before, and the director, a PhD student, gave very clear instruction. This would be a helpful boost for my self-confidence, I thought. Let me settle into something familiar. Feel those butterflies calm down. It should not matter that we are taking the music significantly faster than I had a few years previously. It should not matter that the conductor, she is conducting in a way to which I was unaccustomed. It should not matter. I could recall my security slipping just a little bit at a time. So there's a bit where my part in the music has a skipping bit that goes up to a high note. It's not awkward, but if you lose your footing, so to speak, you will crash out before that final note. So I prepared. Mentally, I watched the measures clock down. I looked ahead in anticipation, zeroed in on the notes as they came whizzing by, and if it had been necessary, and even if it hadn't been, I'm sure I would have girded my loins. And then came the passage. First note, correct. Second note, correct. The third note, correct. Fourth note, correct. Fifth note, correct. Sixth note, correct. Seventh note, the final one, too high. I sailed over and above what I was supposed to play, like a cricketer jumping too high and watching the ball pass under their hands. Well, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that's a human characteristic. It's a recurring comment that I frequently make from this pulpit. I imagine I say it often enough that I would not be surprised if people here suspect that I doth protest too much. Yes, I am quite aware of my imperfections, and as I noted, unreasonable self-criticism can be a pernicious weed whose roots run deep. Even when we do everything right, we still are not immune from mistakes, for we are always moving forward, and where the current takes us, we never know with complete certainty. So even making decisions and executing them perfectly, unless we have the fates on our side, there is a risk that we'll look foolish. People will see our reasoning and feel some sympathy, maybe comforting us with an assurance that, had it been them, they would have done the same thing. Of course, some mistakes go right. The late writer Umberto Eco even discusses this. History is not as clear-cut as we later tell it. In his book Serendipities, he admonishes us for getting the facts wrong about Christopher Columbus. Many people across Europe, Asia, and Africa knew the world was round. In fact, approximate calculations of its size go back 2 millennia from Columbus's fateful journey. The ocean was too large to traverse going east to west, and the winds would not support a boat heading to Asia from Europe. That was the reasoning in Europe for why they did not attempt this journey. So why did Columbus attempt it? As Eco relates, Columbus's calculations were off. He thought the world was much smaller than everyone else, and therefore the trip could be managed. And neither party in the debate had considered the possibility of another landmass on the way. So it was Columbus's mistake, then, that introduced the Americas to Europe, though he obviously did not understand it at the time. Our own telling of the story, brought to us most likely from the American writer Washington Irving, of course has... For us, this is partly a mistake of perspective, and allowing ourselves to engage with these historic mistakes will help heal the trauma experienced by the world these past 500 years. There are other mistakes that we talk about that have acted as a grace. Penicillin on a moldy piece of bread comes to mind. The melted chocolate that led to the creation of the microwave. I would like to think the universe is channeling Bob Ross when we happen upon these happy accidents. After playing that wronged note, the conductor stopped the orchestra. I was mortified, waiting for an admonishment that would confirm that I was in the wrong place, both in the music and in life generally. "Yes," she cried, "do that. You can't hit the right note without that energy. Unless you're prepared to hit a wrong note, you'll never hit the right note." That's what I understood her to be saying. Martin Luther calls on us to sin boldly, which I misinterpret to mean to walk with a measure of confidence in our lives, to live consciously with our choices, supporting them with self-assurance, prepared to change tack if it's called for, but otherwise not letting our sails slip when the wind is blowing. I tell you all this, partly because I am telling myself it, as we cautiously step into the world. That music we listen to, the musicians that are playing with this energy where everything could go wrong, they are taking this risk. They are making themselves vulnerable. And from that, we are transfixed and transformed. All this creative beauty comes from a point of risk and vulnerability. So I'm reminding myself of that, to step a bit more out of my shell from time to time. But I also cannot do this alone. Great music is about collaboration, performer to performer, performer to composer, performer to audience. Where there is relationship, there is vulnerability, there is risk. This chapel has managed great things, not just historically, but continually. It has served as a space for marginalized groups when allowed during the pandemic, and it will welcome back even more groups in the coming year, and hopefully welcome in new people who come hurting from the injustices of the world. And still, the city needs us. Not me, not you, but us. The homeless and the underhoused, the refugees, the hungry, the victims of violence, the persecuted in our city, in our supposedly progressive city. They need us. To care for this city requires us to be willing to get it wrong. It will happen without that energy. But to give that energy is to risk it going wrong. Are we willing to do anything, even if it does not bear fruit, knowing that doing nothing will surely bear no fruit? Are you prepared to attempt that high note, launching yourself up with ecstatic glee, aware that you may miss it? Because the only other option is to let your instrument lay silent at your side. So let's play music together. Amen. That was Birdsong, Birds Near Flowery Field Hide by our Sunday musician Aaron Breeze, who was unable to be with us this morning, but has sent along some beautiful music. I think we'd all agree. So we now have a chance to share our joys and our sorrows, our trials and our triumphs. If you want to share these publicly, please type them into the chat box. If you're here online, I will read them out. If you're here in person, please come forward and light a candle. And if you wish to say something, please come back to the microphone so that those who are listening online are able to participate as fully in the service as possible. And of course, for all of those who wish to hold their joys and their sorrows in their heart, know that your presence here is enough. I wanted to begin with a candle for a composer who passed away yesterday, Frederick Rzewski, who is a fantastic minimalist composer. I was relating, when I learned of his death, I was in a music ensemble my senior year at Eastman, and we did a piece by another composer that cost us over $1,000 to do, and they had actually tried to charge us double, claiming that it was a premiere, which we knew it wasn't. And then Rzewski charged us, I think, about $30 and gave us unlimited copies. So just to state what a good person he was, and he will be missed. From Emma, a candle of thanks for getting my second vaccine yesterday, 5 weeks ahead of schedule. From Sonia, a candle for our son Nick, who is so much better after having an attack of COVID.
I've attempted to light a candle, or two in fact. I want to say how good it is to be here. I haven't been for a few weeks now, and I'd just like to say it's wonderful to be in Cross Street Chapel, which is where I've been a member for many, many years. Indeed, I'm a lifelong Unitarian. And I'd just like to make a little, I hope not too cheeky comment on what Cody has been speaking to us about. The old tradition, if that's the right word, of nobody or nothing is perfect in the world, including a Persian carpet, which is actually has an imperfection built into it as an acknowledgement that only God is perfect.
For all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. And so we return to a time of prayer with these words of Tess Ward. Living One, present in the lazy, hazy Sundays, who makes the dog-day sun to shine in the halcyon, cloud-whipped Sabbath skies. Give me grace to let go as I play this day. As my back uncurls on an old rug, as my thirst is slaked for a cool drink, as my mouth enjoys food eaten outside, as my bare feet fondle the soft meadow grass, as my mind absorbs only book or Sunday paper or gentle chatter, as I have time to notice butterfly or buzzard or buzzing of bee. Let the sweet honey of enjoying the moment drip down my soul, unaware until tomorrow how restorative is this day. Amen. And so we enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. A few notices before we conclude our service. If you're in need of pastoral care, please write to me at minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. Today, one is for Faith and Life, which is a monthly gathering. It's not listed on the notices at present. You will have, if you're in our general mailing list, will have received details for that. What you do see on the notices is the details for our Sunday social, which is at Life is at 12:30, and then the Sunday social. Thank you to Aaron for the music. Thank you to Emma. And thank you, Peter, for the greeting. And thank you all for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Fight for the things that you carry that will lead others to join you. Amen.